Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event with Emma Theriault and Dhonielle Clayton, celebrating the release of Rebel Rose, Emma's new book, which I'm so excited about. I'm like halfway through the book right now, so we're blazing through that. But I am a big lover of fairy tales and Beauty and the Beast in particular, so we are really excited about that. My name is Jenny. For those of you who don't know, I'm one of the co-owners of Mysterious Galaxy. I'm going to kind of give you guys a brief intro to our lovely, lovely authors, and then I'm going to disappear for a bit, and they're going to do their thing and talk all about this amazing book. And then I'll be back, and we'll do some audience questions. So things to know, we have a little Ask a Question link at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions for our authors, please drop them there. That's where I will be pulling from once I come back. And if you see any questions that you really want answered, feel free to upvote them and those kind of move them to the top, and we make sure that we kind of prioritize that way. You can also find a link down below where you can get personalized book plates from Emma for Rebel Rose, which is amazing right now and really exciting. And you can find all of the info on the books there as well. So introducing our lovely panelists, starting with Emma. Emma Theriault was born and raised in Ottawa in Canada, and she has a penchant for Gothic revival architecture and a constant craving for beaver tails, which I have had. They're delicious. Who has not had them? And she has been everything from an enthusiastic bookseller like ourselves here at Mysterious Galaxy, who once sold a book to Trudeau, which is pretty cool, to a purveyor of whitewater rafting adventures all over British Columbia. And we are so excited to have her here. And her conversation partner, who is no stranger to Mysterious Galaxy and to our events, if you've been hanging out, is Dhonielle Clayton. She is the Chief Operating Officer of We Need Diverse Books. She's the co-author of the Tiny Pretty Things series and the New York Times bestseller, The Bells and the Everlasting Rose. She grew up in Washington, D.C., and is a former teacher and librarian. She's also the co-founder of Cake Literary, which is really awesome if you haven't looked into it before. But it is a creative development company whipping up decidedly diverse books for a wide array of readers. And if you go and check it out, it's a really amazing organization and a great place to look. So with that, I will hand it over to Dhonielle, and I will see you all in a bit.
Thank you.
Yay! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about Rebel Rose. And the final cover is it's extraordinary. It's stunning. I can't wait. My copy hasn't gotten here yet because
understandable.
Mail is slow. So I'm just glad that I still have my arc is intact. It's so shiny. I can't wait to pet it. So I'm so glad we get to have this event.
Me too.
Everyone who's watching, I fell in love with this book. And then we are agency siblings. And so then I went and I said, hello, I have to talk to Emma. I love this book. I need it. And I need to have an event. And then we're Disney siblings too. And then I went to Disney and I said, I love this book. I need to talk to her. Can we set something up? So I am so excited to be talking to you tonight.
It wasn't one-sided. I was demanding too. I also wanted the event. I knew I'd be lucky to have it. So
yes. First of all, okay, let's talk about this fabulous book, Rebel Rose, first in the Queen's Council. Woo. First, everybody, sort of like a loose with no spoilers, because there are a lot of twists and turns in this book where I was like, ooh, like I was just like, ah! And so, but if you had to just give like a little summary of like where we're at, what we're doing, what is our Belle up to? Mm-hmm. Because I think that this is, people are like, oh, is it a fairy tale retelling? And I'm like, no.
Not quite.
No. Tell our audience what exactly you've been up to.
Yeah, so the Queen's Council series takes our beloved Disney princesses and then asks the question of what happens next. So, you know, we've had a lot of really magnificent and brilliant retellings, but this is kind of like the first chance we've had to ask authors to imagine their futures. And what's really nice about it is that we're pitting their stories against real history. So I was a history major in university, and Belle is my favorite princess. So when I saw this pitch, before I got it, I was like, this came out of my brain. Like, I was so excited. So I knew I wanted to audition, and then to eventually get it was crazy. But yeah, so in Rebel Rose, we have Belle has just recently broken the curse. We've all seen the film, and it's she's going to Paris. So it opens. I made a conscious decision to open the book in an unfamiliar place to at least the viewer of the film, because I wanted to really drive home the idea that it's different. It's not a retelling. It starts a new story for her. So it's the happily ever after the happily ever after. And yeah, so like I said, with the real history, the French Revolution is brewing. So Paris is not as Belle remembers it. She went as a child. She's excited to go again, but the city is completely different than the Paris she remembers. And as we all know, the French Revolution was an extremely tumultuous time. So she's about to realize some stuff. And like, you know, her position has changed. She's not just a poor provincial girl anymore. She married a prince. So.
And with power comes obligation. Right?
Yeah, duty, responsibility. And she's definitely primed for that. But at the same time, she fell in love with the person. She never fell in love with the idea of being a princess. And it's not necessarily something she wants.
And that's so interesting, because we grow up with these fairy tales and we only see but so far. And it's always the question of, so then what happens after, you know, how do you make a marriage work?
Yeah, and happily ever after is so vague. Like, you know, they're so young. Like, they weren't happy all the time.
Exactly. I used to tell my mother, and she'd always be like, "Oh, I hate it when you watch those Disney princess movies because you had so many questions." I'd be like, "So then what?" So they got married, and then like, what happens next? Like, what do they do after that? And so I was in that piece, and how one's identity comes into conflict with like the love story. Like they love this person, but they are this person, and now there's a set of obstacles in front of them that they have to sort of wrap with. So first of all, Paris is everything. And I want to talk about your connection to France, to French history and culture, because what I loved about this book, I'm definitely a Francophile. Like, I love it so much. I've always loved it. I used to live there for several years.
Oh my goodness.
Very bad. So very bad. Unless I've had like several glasses of wine, I won't speak it. Because it's just bad. But talk to me about your connection, because it comes through. The pages are so rich. And when I think of France, I think of that richness, whether it's cream or chocolate, bread, like cocoa vin,
butter.
It has to, everything has a level of richness to it. And you've done that in the language.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, my last name is French, so that's no surprise. I am French Canadian on my mother's side. But like you, I'm not. My French is rusty. Like, I curse my mother a little bit because she's fully Francophone, and she should have made me a fluent French speaker. But I went to Catholic school, and in where I live, Catholic schools are French immersion, so I wasn't fully French, and then I sort of lost it, yada, yada. Anyway, so I'm really happy to know that you enjoyed the French, because I worked really hard to get it right.
I loved it.
But what actually helped the most, and is really bad for my wallet, is that my boyfriend and I went on a very coincidental trip to Paris last year. And that was when I was drafting Rebel Rose. So we were going to visit, his grandparents used to live in Austria, and we just sort of like tacked Paris onto it because it was cheaper to fly to Paris. So I got to do all this research when I was there, and it was just so magnificent. Like, I just stood on Pont Neuf and like just imagine, because I had already written some of it, and I knew that that's how I wanted to open the story. So that was really good. We got to go like to the conciergerie and see Marie Antoinette's cell and like all things like that. So I think if anything, if that comes through in the writing, it's all down to just getting to be there. So if I keep writing historical fantasy or anything, I'm going to have to go on a lot of trips one day when the world is less chaotic. But yeah, no, I was a history major, like I said. So it was really, really important to me that the history was the most sound that it could be. So I did a lot of reading. I read a lot of books about the French Revolution and tried to immerse myself in that. Like, when I do research, I just essentially rewrite everything that I'm reading, but like, it's how I studied in university, actually, too. I never just read, I would rewrite. So I was doing that. So I felt it was like in me when I was writing it. And I'm so happy to hear, like, a lot of people have complimented that, like, not to toot my own horn. There's definitely things that people have not complimented, but the history was the most important part to me, aside from Belle. Like, I just needed the history to work, and I needed people to feel like they were in France as well.
Right. And that, to me, when we talk about historical fantasy, right, the historical piece is the transportive piece. I was a reader who was like so into it. Historical fantasy with all of the magic, with all of the interesting intrigue. And of course, the French court was always an obsession. And I just feel like you were able to create that luxe, but also there's dirt under the fingernails, right? Because it's revolution. So you're able to also, there are rats in the sewers, you know what I mean? There are people dying.
Yeah.
There's violence.
Yeah,
and I feel like you were able to do that. And I want to talk to you about, you know, sort of how you approach all balancing everything. You know, you're in this great multi-author series, imagining these beautiful princesses in these historical settings. I'm a part of another historical fantasy series with Disney called the Mirror series, taking fairy tale tropes and tracing them through a family. And
which I love. That's so good.
And it's so much fun, but the historical parts, this is what I was so excited to talk to you about, are can be a bit overwhelming, right? Like, how do you make sacrifices for magic with history, right? And I want to know, like, how you were able to do it. Like, how did you overlay the historical pieces and then overlay the fairy tale pieces in magic again? And so, if you can give me your process.
Yeah, so I knew from the start that, like, magic couldn't solve anything for Belle. Like, I was like, you know, that's not the kind of story that I would want to tell. And that's not how the animated film was either, right? Like, there was magic, but it was ultimately Belle who had to do something with either the information she was given or whatever. So I knew that I would carry that on. Like, I never wanted magic to save the day or like end the revolution, because that's another thing, is that I had to find a balance where, you know, I'm not disagreeing with the less violent aims of the French Revolution, and neither is Belle. So I had to find this like spot that she could occupy where she, you know, is afraid of the violence. There's sort of I guess it's not really a spoiler. It's in the beginning of the book, but there's definitely been excerpts released. But Belle is sort of given a warning of what's to come. Like, you know, the Reign of Terror didn't start right away. So in the early days of the French Revolution, it was violent, but not in the same way that the Reign of Terror eventually became. So you could kind of see how somebody would be like, no, this is fine. Like, I agree with this, yada, yada. So I needed Belle to understand that, like, this isn't the worst of it. It's going to get much worse. And she wants to protect her people not from the changes that the French Revolution are going to bring about, but from the violence that came with the Reign of Terror and stuff like that. So I knew that at the scaffold of the story was the history. And, like, you know, if you are familiar with the events of the French Revolution in the early days, like, my book follows those. Belle witnesses the aftermath of the storming of the Bastille, and the book ends in late October. So if you know what happened during the French Revolution, you know all the things that happened. And so that was the framework I was working around. And then magic, I just sort of laid on top of it. Like, everything was going to happen the way that it happened in real life. But then magic was just like this thread that I could weave through it that sort of moved the story along and sort of provided like a bit of narrative in which Belle knows things that anyways. Basically, like, the history was the most important part. And then the magic had more leeway, but not in a way that would actually like save Belle. She had to save herself eventually.
I love that. I love that too, because I was researching 1920s New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I had to like get all of those, like, these are the things that happened in the time with which my story took place. But then my character has magic. Oh God. And like, how will this magic either influence how she engages with what's happening?
Yeah.
How does it complicate it? And what I love about what you've done is that it leaves like it makes a tension. It creates tense moments. And you might want her to use it. And she's just a very complicated, interesting character, which leads me to my next question of, we watched the films, right? As a kid, we collected the memorabilia. We had a vision of what we thought Belle was or who she is, right?
Yep.
And all of the people in her world. Cogsworth, Lumiere,
Mrs. Potts.
Right. And you were able to take some of the things that we love, but you went in different directions. So I want you to talk a little bit about Belle and sort of like the Belle you loved as a kid versus the Belle in this book is very different, and I love it. I think the Belle that I believed should have been probably in the films, if I'm being honest.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so a book needs conflict. So I knew that I wasn't writing a book in which Belle has taken, you know, all of the good things that happen in the movie and used them to make herself flawless. Like, she's not flawless. So, you know, we all know her as compassionate, stubborn. She's always going to speak her mind. And so I tried to keep the core of those. But then I had to imagine that she lives in a world where everybody except those who lived in the castle stormed the castle and tried to kill her husband, and they don't remember that. So, you know, and he's still, like, in my book, he's called Leo. So the Beast, aka Leo, is living with the after effects of having been cursed for 10 years. And it, you know, happily ever after at the end of the animated film did not take into account, like, the definite PTSD that would give someone.
Yep.
So in my book, he's really wrestling with that. And Belle, you know, has to make sacrifices in their relationship, whereas, you know, when she was his prisoner, or even between becoming prisoner and then falling in love, she would speak her mind more than she does maybe in my book. Because in my book, Belle's like, I have to make these sacrifices because this is a person that I love, and I can't push him. I have to support him. So she's definitely not passive, but she's weighing so many different things. She's about to rule a kingdom that she spent her whole life longing to leave, and that's really hard for her to grapple with, because she A, doesn't think she deserves it, B, doesn't think she's ready for it, but it's coming for her no matter what. She fell in love with him. She now has to love this whole kingdom. So to me, it was you know, at the start, I really struggled with writing Belle, because there is so much expectation and everybody knows who Belle is, but they all still have their own relationship with her. So what I had to decide to do as a writer was that I understand that I can't please everybody, and I never will. Right. And then from there, I was like, I just have to tell the story that feels authentic to me. And that's a more mature Belle, a Belle that makes sacrifices, a Belle that, you know, does things that may seem different than the Belle in the film, but ultimately the goal is the same. Like, she's scared, you know, like breaking the curse doesn't mean she'll never make a mistake again. And there's so much going on. Like, the French Revolution is looming, you know. I think I must have answered this in an interview at some point, but it was that, you know, like, readers reading it might not recognize her, but I think that this was always the kind of conflict that would emerge, but the French Revolution turned it up to 11. Like, they were going to be able to ignore, say, these, like, sticky parts of their relationship, or, like, you know, how they're going to rule or how they're going to do things like that, because they were in a principality in my book. So they probably could have ignored a lot of stuff. But then the French Revolution happened. So, you know, it's like any relationship. If there's an outside stressor, it's going to make these things rise to the surface a lot quicker. So she's overwhelmed. She's got a lot to deal with. And then they get separated in my book. So, except not in an emotional sense, but physically they are apart. So I had to write a Belle that, you know, dealt with things the way that I imagined she would. And she's facing a lot of pressure. And I knew that not everybody would be happy with it, but I had to be happy with what I wrote. So, and other readers are happy with it. So,
right. I also think that it's historically accurate, right? Everyone wants to read a story about, especially a woman, who is different than all other women. Right? And there's this pressure. And unless we write those things, then our character becomes a Mary Sue, right?
Exactly.
Right. And that's frustrating to me, because we can never have a nuanced conversation about, like, what historical stressors are placed on women to make them behave the way that they behave. And so, like, whenever I watched Belle, I was like, Belle has been imbued by her father to be like very great. She's very mouthy, which is great. And it's a privilege, because a lot of us would have been killed or jailed for having all of that. Not everyone had those freedoms. And I love how you tempered her, because you made it real. It's like, oh no, there are lives on the line.
Yes, I can't be the mouthy person that mouthed off to the beast. That worked in that scenario. But now I have a whole kingdom that I feel responsible for in a way that I've never expected to. And she's dealing with men who have never listened to a woman, who have never respected a woman. So she has to tread carefully, and it kills her. Like, she wishes she could just be the Belle she was in the animated film, but she's being smart about it too. So, I think.
I think so too, and I think that this is what happens when we talk about what is after the fairy tale. It's the real. It's like, what happens when the music goes off? Are we still going to dance? How do we dance when the music goes off? And the French Revolution would make some of her behaviors change. And I just think that you shouldn't listen to any of those. Because
I mean, they're allowed. They're, I'm not ever begrudging anyone, but I'm proud of who I made Belle. So.
Right. And I think that you took her to a new place for discussion. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I hope so.
And that's super important, I think. And can you talk a little bit about Leo and sort of how because he was the beast, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to troll Zoraida Cordova, who's in the comments too. She loves a good beast, okay? A beast would be, if she got to choose who her husband would be from Disney Princess, it would be the beast. It's the beast in real life. It's the beast in Disney. She loves it. I want you to talk about, you're going to yell at me. I want you to talk about sort of how you imagined his character and you took him to very interesting places.
Yeah, so I mentioned it briefly, but he's definitely suffering. His fears, and again, because of the French Revolution, get dialed up to 11. Like, these are things that they maybe could have ignored for a long time, but then they're in Paris for the storming of the Bastille. They literally flee Paris with a nobleman. So, they have ties to it that really strengthen their fears. And I knew that, he wasn't going to walk away from being the beast for 10 years and never think about it again. So in my book, he's pretty haunted by that. He's not haunted necessarily by the beast. He's haunted by the idea that he could lose control like he once did, or that he could lose himself as he did, right? It wasn't until Belle came along that he was willing to try to be better. Like, he spent most of those 10 years just living as a beast and deciding that that's his life now. So there's a line in my book where he says something to the effect of like, I was in that darkness and you were the one that made me want to seek the light. So he emerges from the animated film in my book, very stressed out, very trying to do the right thing. He's ruling a kingdom that he largely ignored for a really long time. And he's suffering. Like he's haunted by nightmares where he's the beast again. Belle is the only witness to this, weakness in him. So for her, she's making decisions not just for herself, she's making decisions for him as well, which is, I think, why it brings them closer ultimately. Like, they're the only ones that really know. But he is such an interesting character. Like, he wants to be better. He wants to do better, not just for Belle, but for himself and for his people. And I had to find this way for them to not be at odds, but Belle is the voice of the common people in their relationship. He is sympathetic to that, but he was raised in an entirely different world. So they're never fighting. They both want the same thing, but he's so susceptible to fear. Yeah. And so there are characters in the book who know this and who are able to manipulate him in ways that he wouldn't, think that he could be manipulated, but they know exactly what to do to make him this fearful beast again. Like he's not in control anymore, and he fears losing that part of himself again. So he's willing to do things that maybe Belle disagrees with, but ultimately she knows that he has to do that. She can't force him to do anything. So to Belle, it's okay, fine, you go. I won't say what he does, but they get separated, and it's understandable. And Belle's mad, but she's like, fine, I'll fix it myself. You go do that bullshit.
Yeah.
And I'll just do it myself because I'm not going to make you compromise on your convictions, just the same way that she wouldn't want him to make her do that. So it's like any relationship, right? Like you've
got to find your middle ground also, because I remember being in love with watching how this relationship played out in film, obviously. But I was like, but how do you make a marriage work from that, right? Like, when the little girl in me turned off, it was like, oh, right. Oh, they love each other. But I'm like, oh, God, living with a man like this, he doesn't change magically everything about him. Now he's not the beast.
No, and
a petulant prince.
Yeah.
Hair.
And in my book, I really liked Mrs. Potts was the person in Rebel Rose who is so willing to be this sounding board for Belle, where she's like, she's never been in a relationship. Like, I mean, I guess we don't know what she did before the animated film, but you can pretty much surmise that this was her first, her first real love. And so, you know, she doubts herself or she's not sure of herself. And Mrs. Potts is the first to tell her, like, you know, who you are is who saved this kingdom. So you need to trust yourself. You need to understand that you're not you don't live to please him or do the things that he wants you to do. You guys are partners, and they didn't start out as partners. So it's a difficult, thorny part of their relationship, but I couldn't just gloss over that. Like, I couldn't write a story where she never deals with the fact that her husband is somebody who imprisoned her once. Like,
yeah, it's just a little thing,
just a minor detail
in their courtship, like in their, like, oh, let's reminisce on our anniversary. Oh, how did you guys meet?
Oh, it's an interesting story.
Right. You know, like, I love that, because there could be the easy road you could have taken with this book where you don't talk about any of that, which makes it unreal, which doesn't give that texture of realness to it. But you went there.
Yeah, that's why I so appreciate Disney and my editor, you know, like, they never, I mean, the only real directive I was given was, like, they can't break up. And I was like, as if I would break them up, you know, but like, the darkness was not something that I was ever told that I needed to tone down or just gloss over. So I'm really happy. Like, the team was so good.
Yes, and there's no way you could make the lollipop version of the French Revolution. Like,
no, oh my God.
Like, it would just be like, what's happening?
I know. Yeah, I wasn't interested in telling that story. Like, you know,
people
my
were
book
starving.
is not exactly. And Belle sees that, and Belle, you know, senses it before it even really happens. Like, she knows what it was like to be hungry, and she knows what it's like for peasants in France. So, you know, she comes back from this trip out into Paris the same day that he comes back from his trip to Versailles, and they've both had very different experiences. And she's like, he sort of dismisses the peasants, and she goes, no, I'm pretty sure that, like, this is a powder keg and it's going to explode. And it's hard for them to see eye to eye there. And, you know, and it was just this conflict right from the start. Like, I needed them to both not be on different sides, but have different interpretations of what was happening there. Because of course he wouldn't get it. He's so privileged. He's a prince. Like,
he couldn't see it. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know what it means to be hungry. So how do you bring that and make it feel real to someone who hasn't experienced it? Which I love, like, the fraughtness, that good tension in their relationship. And I just think it's great. And you have some really interesting side characters, which are amazing. Some that we recognize, some that are a different one. I'm not going to spoil. And also the magic. Can we talk about sort of how you build magic? What are your rules? What are you most interested in and excited about when it comes to magic? Because the magic in this is very fascinating.
Yeah. So for me, magic is always most interesting in its limitations. You know, I don't want the magic that doesn't cost something or that doesn't have negative effects, basically. So with the pitch, it was pretty short when I first got it, and it didn't make the connection that I eventually made in the book. But the idea in the Queen's Council series will be that there is this overarching mystical sort of magical being that connects all of the stories eventually. And so I got that pitch, and that was listed, and then the French Revolution, and then I was sitting there, my boyfriend and I put the album on that night just to, like, I was so excited. and the prologue came on where, you know, he's talking about the cruel prince and, you know, stuff like that. And then in the Enchantress, and then my brain just, like, exploded, because I was like, well, of course, the Queen's Council is the Enchantress. Like, that was the first thing that made me think, like, oh, I have to write this. Like, I wanted to write it before, but then I was like, no, this is a really good idea. So in my book, my goal was to give the Enchantress a larger reason for everything that she did, because we don't really get her story. We don't really know what motivated her to do all of that. So in my story, she is this magical being that has foresight as a gift, and she knows what's coming, and what she's fearing is the reign of terror. Like, you know, revolution is bad, but then the worst part is the reign of terror that comes later, and thousands of people die. So to her, she has somehow pieced together with visions or something like that, that Belle has to be the one to save this prince. Like, they're going to play a larger role here, but he is not worthy of Belle. And so it's a little contrived, but she essentially curses him because she knows that she has to bring them together, and he has to make himself worthy of Belle. And it's for each other as well, because they both go through a transformation. So, yeah, so to me, that was like the point of the story where I was like, oh, I'm going to connect these. And that's what's going to, because if I didn't connect them, that meant that there was this Queen's Council magical being. And then there was also an Enchantress, and they're unrelated, it was like, that's not going to work. So I give the Enchantress a backstory and a reason for doing what she does. And she doesn't just appear in the beginning of the book. She appears throughout. And she's an interesting character because I didn't want her, I touched on this earlier, but I didn't want her to just be able to wave a wand and make things have no problems. And like, here's what you do, Belle. So her magic is limited. She has the gift of foresight, but she doesn't really know. It's not an answer. It's just an interpretation or like a vague thing that she knows is coming. So she's trying to give Belle tools, but Belle also has to understand. She has to be smart herself. She has to figure things out on her own. So with magic, like I said, it's the limitations of it that I find the most interesting. It wouldn't be a very interesting story to me in any book if magic just saved the day, like a Deus Ex Machina of just like magic. It's all solved.
And here we have magic.
Yeah, exactly.
And now no more problems.
So the Enchantress was so fun to write because I couldn't believe I was giving her a backstory, and then how well it worked with the world that Disney wanted me to write anyway. So that's when I knew. And I think that literally might be the reason I got the book. Like, if I'm being honest, I said it out loud and my boyfriend looked at me and he was just like he was dumbfounded. And it doesn't sound that profound right now, but you have to know that in the moment, like connecting those two, I was like, wow.
That's key.
Yeah.
And you know that she doesn't get her due, right? That was always my issue with Beauty and the Beast, is that we never knew sort of like who this person was to the curse, and a curse that was like so devastating.
I know.
Where I'm like, oh God, like we're stuck in this form forever. And so
she has a lot of guilt. Like, she didn't do that to be cruel or to punish him. It's like the only way that she can conceive of a way to have the outcome change, to have her vision change, to have the future change. And so, she has remorse. Like, throughout the book, she does not feel worthy of like Belle's like if Belle has ever said anything good to her, she's just like, like I've done bad things. So like, it's not this like whitewash, just like she's a magical being and it's fine that she did what she did. Like, she faces her own kinds of consequences too. So
which is why magic is so interesting when it has a price.
Yes, exactly.
And when it causes harm to everyone because of play. I mean, it's for such good tension. And it made me wonder, too, because this world has magic, it has the backdrop of very, very bloody real historical events. And it has the fairy tale trappings, which when we look at the base of fairy tales, they're pretty dark.
Yes.
And that's why I loved it. I wonder if you could have survived this world. I would not survive this world. I would be done for. A plague would have gotten me.
Yeah. I think that if I had an Enchantress telling me to get the heck out of there, I would have listened. Or I like to think that I'm like perceptive. So maybe I would have been one of the nobility in France who were like, months before the French Revolution really kicked off, we're like, we're just going to leave.
Go to Italy.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I want to try my luck in America.
Right. No, it's interesting to think about too. If you can survive your own world. I think about that a lot. And there is a lot of darkness.
Belle is much smarter than me.
I just, like, if someone's like, oh, you shouldn't go in that room, I don't go in that room.
I know. No, me either. No. Oh, my God.
Like, I was never that inquisitive kid. My childhood nickname is Chicken Little. I was scared of the sky falling. I was just nervous. It was like, my parents never had to say, don't go in the basement. I'm not going in there. I'm not going down there.
Nothing down there for me.
I'm not going down there. So if they told me, like, if Enchantress said, hey girl, hey, it's about to get real rough in this city, I'd be like, oh, let's go. Pack it up. Where are we going? Where are we going? Switzerland? What's happening?
I don't care. I'm out of here.
Out of here. I was a nervous kid. Nervous kid. So I know that the worlds that I write them because, I would never have been the hero. I would be that doesn't do the right thing in the moment because I'm underneath a desk or a table hiding.
I relate to that.
Scared. Yeah. Constantly scared. But I just wonder, you would have been out too. You wouldn't survive this world.
I mean, I'd like to think that, but then at the same time, I'm like extremely unlucky in some aspects of my life, and I'm very accident prone. So like, I don't know, maybe when Belle in the book witnesses the aftermath of the storming of the Bastille when they behead the Marquis de Launay, and she ends up at the end of that unconscious, I would probably have ended up just like trampled by a horse there or something. Yeah. Like I would have met an interestingly violent end before things even really started. Like,
I feel like I would have been poisoned. I'm like, oh, you'd have been poisoned easily. You'd been done. You'd have been out of there quick.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. I was in France, I think it was 2 years ago. I have a good friend who lives there who's a YA writer. Her name is Amy Plum. She's fabulous. And she was like, we're going to go for my birthday down to the Catacombs. I said, and she said, we're going to do a chocolate tasting, and then we're going in the Catacombs. I said, I will come for your chocolate tasting, but you're not getting me to go under the city where there's more dead people. And she was like, come on, we have like, and I said, it's illegal. I was like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. Oh, no. She was like, there's so much history. You'll love it. You love French history. You love Parisian history. I said, I will read it in this book.
Yeah, I'll look at pictures.
No, ma'am. No way.
So you haven't been to the Catacombs?
I will not do it. I'm terrified. I am a person who believes in ghosts and spirits and will follow you home. Like, I come from a very superstitious family. Yeah. I would have had to have so many pennies in my shoes because my grandmother's always like, you have to put pennies in your shoes so that the ghosts don't follow you home.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. No.
I would have gone, but it was booked up. Like the tours book up so far in advance, so we couldn't do it. But maybe I'm lucky that we didn't.
Right. She has a friend who wrote one of the best-selling books on the Catacombs, and is like, he was taking on a private tour, and she was like, you're gonna miss out. I said, oh, my dreams will be and my spirit will be okay with that. I'm too scared. I'm afraid to be down there. I'm like, I'm going to get trapped. I'm going to die down here. Like,
it's how horror films start, for sure, is like an innocent little jaunt on a private tour of the Catacombs. Nobody even knows we're down here.
And then there's like a whole skeleton that comes alive. There are spirits from the French Revolution that are trapped in the catacombs, and they come with me home. I'm just a chicken. So
no, I get it. I totally get it.
But I do love France, and I miss it. And
me too. We were there so quickly. Like, it's high on the list for when traveling is a thing again.
Exactly. When the world is okay again. I do think that Paris is the city of lights. It is the most beautiful city in the world to me. So come for me. I love it. I live in New York City, which is a fun, amazing city. Another great city. However, Paris is a place to fall in love. It's a place to eat well. And I just feel like you brought alive a period of history that I am a sucker for. If there's anything that's on TV, like when Versailles was on TV, like I watched it all. I don't know what it is. There's the drama.
Yeah, it's got so much going for it. Like so much happened in such a short period of time, and there were so many extremes, going from one extreme to another. It's a really interesting time. Like I would definitely, if we could like pick a time in history that we could be like observers who aren't affected by anything, I would love to go back and like see Louis' court and see the aftermath. Like it would be so interesting.
Exactly. There are those time periods, and just to see all of the shoes and the clothing, my first series, The Bells, is drawn from Marie Antoinette's court. I said, what if that court was magical?
Yeah.
And built everything out of that because of all of the weird beauty things they were doing.
So strange.
I was like, this is fascinating. And I like this stuff. And the French have such weird cultural norms that I was like, I was here for it. I was into it. And my family spent a lot of time going to New Orleans, which is such a French city, and you see the French imprint. So like that echo.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I was like, I'm here for it. And so when I saw your book, I was like, and it's Belle? It's dark? I was like, this is a book for me. I'm your reader. And,
I'm so glad you liked it.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more question before our favorite bookseller comes back on. to ask questions in the question box. If you have questions, please put them in your question box because in about 3 minutes we're going to start going to audience questions and upvote anything that you want Emma to answer. Okay, so this is a silly question, and it deals with the movie as well.
Okay.
If you could be one of the inanimate objects in the castle, right?
Yeah.
Which one would you want to be?
So is this an existing one, or do I just say any object that I think I would end up being? Mm-hmm.
Right. You could make one up, or you could be an existing one.
Okay, so if it's an existing one, Mrs. Potts, because she's so warm all the time.
Yeah.
You know, she's got a good deal. Like, she's not so weirdly shaped or like, you know, living in constant agony as a wardrobe or something. So she gets to move around.
Cool, though. I don't want to be the wardrobe either, but the wardrobe is really weird and cool.
And at least Mrs. Potts is like hopping around, like the wardrobe. I guess she moves too, but not into anyway.
Yeah.
But if like right now a spell was cast on me and it was like going to turn me into something, the probably not true answer that I've answered in an interview before is that, like, so I'm a really curious person and I like to have a lot of information. So I think if it was to play off of that, I'd become some sort of writing implement, because I think that before Belle came along, my goal would have been like, okay, how do we break this curse? We need to like gather all the info that we can. So I would have wanted it all written. I would have wanted it all written down so we could figure it out. So I think that's what it would be. So maybe like a fancy quill.
Yeah.
Like that's big cool. Plumage.
Yes. And unlimited ink.
Yeah, exactly. What would you be?
My favorite person, which is weird, but is Cogsworth.
Thank you. I love it.
I love Cogsworth. Like, I've always loved Cogsworth. I just love it. So if I had to be in the castle, I'd kind of want to be Cogsworth's boo. I would be a grandmother clock. Like, I'd be like, that's my man.
No, that's perfect.
Right? And
I love him. I loved writing him too. Like his voice came so easily to me.
Yeah, I love him.
I've joked about it before, but I'm like, I must be like him, because when I was writing him, I was like, it just was so simple. It just flowed right.
I know. Nobody really loves him the way that I do. They're like, why Lumiere is the star? Like, you know.
No. Cogsworth is so warm underneath his like duty at all times manner, you know?
Exactly.
Like, that's why I made him have a closer relationship to Belle in my book than, say, Lumiere does. Like, they're all close. Obviously, they've been through trauma together. Like, but Cogsworth and Belle have like a bit of a closer relationship, and I think it's because, you know, he knows her on a deeper level, and he knows how much it takes for her to like put aside her feelings or put aside what she really wants to do, because I think he does that too, you know, like he has this sense of duty, and he can see that in Belle as well. So
I love him. And so I would just want to be a grandmother clock with him in the castle. But if I could like pick an instrument probably now, I would want to do something that was like troublesome, like troublemaking, almost like something really loud and like, you know, like that I could clang. Like
maybe you're like a triangle or like some symbols
or a music box. Like I kept thinking music box that I could like wind myself up and make noise
with a little ballerina in it. A little ballerina in it. Yeah, that would be perfect.
I'm like, I'm here, guys. Music.
Yeah, music plays every time I talk.
Exactly. Like something like that, something silly. But
yeah.
It was my favorite part of the world of Beauty and the Beast. And as a kid, I was like, oh my God. Like, why can't I have a cup with a little chip that will talk to me? You know, like, why is my mug not like that? Yeah, like, why? Why isn't this real? Like, I want to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm obsessed. Definitely obsessed with that. But, oh my God, I'm so happy you like Cogsworth like I did.
I love him.
You did him so well.
Thank you.
I was waiting. I was like, okay, what are we going to do with Cogsworth? Like, my guy better be taken care of. Like,
I did my best.
You did real well. So
thank you.
Now it's time for audience questions. Yay! Hi.
I'm back. I was trying to find, I have a little stuffed Cogsworth that's my daughter's, and I'm in my daughter's room, but I have no idea where she threw that little Cogsworth. but I love him too.
Oh, yay!
Not that many people love him, but I love him.
I mean, I could pull out like a lot of like random Beauty and the Beast paraphernalia from this room that I've now like used my daughter as an excuse to like purchase. But I'm not going to do that.
I believe you.
But I swear, like I wrote down in my questions, I was like, "What inanimate object would you be?" And so you already answered that for my question. But we can keep going. And I will also say I'm with Dhonielle on the Catacombs. I would not go down there.
No.
No, I am not being trapped underground. No, thank you.
Can you imagine? Oh my God. I wouldn't make it. I don't have survival skills.
I love going to the Père Lachaise cemetery when I was studying abroad. That was beautiful. And I love that. I'm fine with the graveyard. Not going underground though. No. Drawing the line.
No.
So we have some really great audience questions. And one of the first, quite a few. We'll get through as many as we can. But what scene gave you the greatest joy to write, and what scene pulled at your heartstrings the most when you were writing?
Okay, so greatest joy. At the beginning of the book, when they're still in Paris, they are staying with Leo's cousin, who's a full-blown aristocrat, and he throws a dinner sort of to show Belle off because she's something of an oddity to everyone, obviously. And, you know, during this time period in France, an oddity was really interesting to everyone. So she is sort of thrust into her first experience as, you know, Leo's wife, her first experience with the nobility. She's sort of been sheltered in the castle back in Avignon. So she doesn't really know what to expect. And she also doesn't really know etiquette. So it was fun to write because she has no qualms about telling a nobleman all the ways in which he's an idiot. So they get into a fight, and Belle's, you know, is just going to be the Belle we all know from the movie when she speaks her mind. So that was really fun to write, and I really enjoyed that. And it does serve for the rest of the book. She sort of understands that, like, oh, okay, so I probably shouldn't have done that in terms of like making my life easier. So that sort of colors the way she treats etiquette and things like that in the rest of the book. But it was fun for her to have that moment. And then the heartstrings. Oh, I don't want to get spoilery, but there is a scene, I can't say too much about it, but we do see an old character from the films, and Belle is in a position where she has to sort of do what she did in the animated film, which is see past someone's darkness and look for the light within type thing, just obviously not in a romantic way, but it was really nice to have this echo of the original film. And without being able to say too much, it's not that interesting of an answer, but you'll know it when you read it. And it was hard to write because I wanted to get it right, but I really enjoyed being able to sort of get some closure from a story from the original film that we didn't have even at the end of the animated film. So
very cool. Next up is, what advice would you give writers who hope to make a full-time career of being an author?
Oh boy. Well, Dhonielle can definitely answer this as well because she has more experience than me. But I'll quickly say, because I don't have that much experience, this is my first book. So all I will say is that perseverance is literally the most important part, I think, because I've been pursuing publication, at least seriously, for probably like 6 years. And I've had setbacks and all things like that. But the one thing I did right was not give up. So everybody's journey is different. You can't be discouraged by the stories you hear of people who just seem to walk right into it. They've worked hard too. You don't know everyone's story, and not everybody talks about their struggles. So, you know, I see people who are really discouraged, and I just want them to know that it's literally a normal part of the journey is to feel that way and to move through it. Like the only way out is through, and is to keep going. So, but Dhonielle will have a much...
That's literally the same advice. I think that when you're a writer and you keep writing. And I think that you will do that, and you should do that, and don't let anyone extinguish your flame. And just know that there are many different ways to be a writer. There are lots of different paths. And
mine is a different one too, right? Like this book, I had to audition for it. I didn't write it before it was bought. So I was open to that, and my agent knew I was open to that. So if you get to a point where you are working with an agent, make sure they know that you're open to different paths, would be my advice as well. Yeah.
Stay open. Stay open-minded. Write and read all of the things. I think that writers are readers, and that to me is how I stay tethered to being a writer. And also, I had to have 4 jobs until books. I was on book 7.
Wow.
So your day job, kids. Literally, it takes a long time, and I still have many day jobs.
Yeah.
Because writing is unpredictable, and I need my health care.
Yes, I was going to say I'm really privileged and fortunate as a Canadian. Like, we just have universal health care. My day would look much different if I did not have that guarantee. So I hope that America is headed in that direction.
I hope we're headed in many directions.
Yes.
That we have our reign of terror is finishing. Yes.
We had our countdown before the show. Thank you. Well, so everybody's path is different, but we did have another question that was if you could talk a little bit more about your particular path, and especially kind of how you got involved with Disney and writing a book for Disney.
For sure. So I signed with my agent, Susie Townsend, in 2016. So obviously there's been a lot of time since then. My first book didn't sell. And that was obviously a really big setback for me, but I worked on another book, after a lot of grieving. And then while I was working on that book, I got an email in 2018 from Susie asking if I wanted to audition for this project. And there was a foreword attached, and it was just the pitch and stuff like that. And I just couldn't believe it. And I never thought I'd get it. I thought I was doing it as I was like, it'll be a learning experience to audition for something. It wasn't until I literally had it that I was like, oh no, I'm doing this. Okay. So yeah, it was an audition process. I'm not sure. I don't know details about, how many writers tried out or anything like that, but I had 2 weeks to write 3 chapters. So it did change a bit after I got it too, but it was about 7,500 words. And then it was just sort of like a traditional acquisitions process. Like, my editor liked mine and brought it to acquisitions like she would if I had submitted an original work to her. And then I guess they chose mine. Yeah. So here we are. So it's a bit different than if you write something as a debut novelist and try to sell that. So now I'm not a debut anymore. So when I do come out with another book, that won't be my debut novel, even though it is the first thing that I've written, not on my own, but you know what I mean? So it's a bit, Elizabeth Lim had the same journey, actually. She sold her Disney book before she debuted as a novelist. So it's definitely possible. Signing with an agent is the most important part. It's only the first part, though. I remember thinking like, oh, smooth sailing ahead. Like, I've signed with Susie. Like, this is great. And actually what was so weird was the day that this book went to acquisitions, I knew it was going. My book that I didn't sell, like my first book, was over 2 years at that point on submission, and it was going to its last acquisitions meeting that day as well. So on the same day, one of my books died, but then the other one lived. So it was just so weird. I was like, how is it possible that after 2 years it would all happen on one day? But
welcome to publishing. Anyway. And your resilience, and that's what's important. It's like, and I believe that there's no wasted time. So even though that book died, you can pluck elements from it and create something brand new.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that writers who are listening realize that writing is an exercise and a muscle. And I believe that even when it doesn't work, there's something to be learned from that, and you can still pull things apart. It took me
it was a valuable experience, and like, it was hard, but it's a part of it. You have to go on sub. You're going to get rejected. You're going to be told no. It doesn't end ever. So it was like a trial by fire at first, a long 2 years of fire. But
now you're here, and it's great. And I just feel like you've got to be stubborn. That would be stubborn, and like, know yourself, know what you want to do, stick to your vision, and just say, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to be stubborn myself and keep writing.
Yes.
Yeah. And you did good.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I love thinking about writing as a muscle that you have to exercise. I have to repeat that to my students all the time, but I don't think they believe me as much as they would believe you, writers. But it's so true and so important to practice.
And all kinds of
skill,
writing, too.
right?
Like if you're writing for your job and if you're writing at work and stuff like that, like that's all important. It doesn't have to be fiction writing. You know,
Exactly.
I went to a high school for writing, like an arts high school, and I wasn't writing the type of stuff I write now, but it definitely made me a writer to write and be critiqued and be, you know, things like that. So it's all important. Cool. Writing is never wasted.
No,
never. It is never wasted time.
9 novels from start to finish until I wrote one that was like, an agent was ready to go. It was like, yes. And again, it took me 2 agents, and then the 3rd agent is the one that sold it. So it's like
you can't give up.
It can be. Another thing my mother would say about me is I'm stubborn. I just like, I'm gonna keep coming. I'm like, I'm here at the door. Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Still here.
We're still here. My face is through this window. Still here.
And the similarities between different types of writing is also just so important. I teach academic writing now and I'm in academia, but I always talk about it as creative writing, and
absolutely
hearing that from the other side as well is always really nice.
Writing history papers, like I tried so hard to make the writing be an equal part, like of the research, you know, like you want the writing, it has to be compelling. And I love all types of writing.
Which kind of is a really nice segue into our next question, which somebody wanted. I know you've talked about being a history major and studying history a lot, but what was your research process for going back and kind of getting into this book now?
Yeah. Okay. So aside from going to Paris accidentally, which was really helpful, but not necessary. I could have done it without it. It's mostly about, I need to immerse myself. So like, even if that's just like, I watched the Marie Antoinette film like over and over and over again.
Same, such a good film.
That movie.
Yeah. Sounds like it's so good. I listen to it all the time.
So good.
So like, yeah, you're like, and then, the Palace of Versailles website is also amazing. So I was like, because they have facts too that aren't even related. And so you get to learn all this stuff. So that was really helpful. I read a lot of political pamphlets from the time. I read a lot of Enlightenment thinkers because I knew that Belle would be somebody who knew about these Enlightenment thinkers and who was, that's part of the reason she wants to go to Paris, is that so she can go to salons and so she can meet, you know, these brilliant people that she's been reading about. And so it's this allure for her, is that she wants to leave her dusty little kingdom where nothing ever happens and like go to the glittering Paris. And then obviously it's a bit different than what she expected, but she does get the What is the Third Estate pamphlet shoved into her hand at one point. So that was an important part as well. But mostly it's just immersing myself. I like to listen to the music, watch whatever I can that has anything to do with that time period. And then I'll have a lot of books. Like because I was a history major, I have a ton of books to pull off my shelf. So the first thing I do with a new project is like look at my own library and like any book that will work, I'm going to read. I'm going to write down relevant facts. Maybe 10% of it ends up in my book, but like I can't move forward without feeling like I'm solidly in that world. And then also like if anything is good in my book, we need to thank my copy editors as well. Like, at one point I said something like she could see the Seine in the distance, and they flagged it and they were like, actually, looking at a map, I'm not sure that she'd be able to see like where it was at the building.
Oh, I'm like, really? Let me live.
I'm like, yeah, let's change it, I guess. Like nobody would ever notice that, but I'm so impressed by people who like thrive and live for details like that. So, it's all about getting as much different information as you can from different sources and stuff like that, and then putting it all together and understanding what's important and what you do not need to put in your book, but seems important.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe 2 quick questions before we're done. And for both of you, the first is, what are some of your favorite books this year? I know before we were talking about, this for all of 2020, one of the great things it's produced is some amazing books, I think. So what are some of your favorite books from this year and what are you looking forward to?
I'll go first. That's cool. Yeah. I really liked Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power, who is a friend of mine, admittedly, but it's a brilliant book. I really loved that. And another one that sticks out so much was Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardus. It was, oh my goodness, just so good. Like the cover was like enough to pull me in, and then you read the words and you're like, oh, okay. So then 2021, which is so soon, which is crazy. Yeah. This year has been just so unbelievable time-wise, slow and fast. I'm really looking forward to Down Comes the Night by Allison Saft. And Jade Fire Gold by my friend June Tan comes out in the fall. It's going to be so good. And those are both debuts, actually, which is really nice. And Witches Steeped in Gold.
You stole mine! I love her! That's what I was just messaging with her. She's like my new wife, my brother's boo. Yeah.
By Shannon Smart. It's going to be so good. The cover is to die for.
Exactly.
Like, oh my God. So yeah, there's so many good books next year, but I won't steal any more from you if you have any others to say.
So for this year, I'm loving. I'm looking over because I have my like little stack of things to work through.
Oh yeah.
Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson is just extraordinary. It is stressful, but it is necessary. All of her books are like you're reading them and you're like, oh my god, I'm stressed out. And they're based on real cases. Love that book. Another book that I love is called Everybody Looking by Candace Elo, and it's a National Book Award finalist, and it's told in prose. It's told in poetry. So good, so emotional. Rip your heart out. Fantasy-wise, A Song of Wraiths and Ruin. Obsessed with. Hate to Love. Indie, so good. A Song Below Water. Sirens. Really good. Legendborn. King Arthur.
Yes.
2021, Witches Steeped in Gold, I'm not going to shut up about, and also Wings of Ebony.
Oh, yes.
So good. Witches Steeped in Gold, every time I message her, I'm like, all of my hair's falling out because I'm stressed out about what you've done to me. And like, gee, Shannon, she's like the worst. She's like, oh, how many braids do you have left? Because I'm going to take all of them. And I'm like, you're so mean. So mean. But I love her so much. So excited.
Yeah.
Oh, so much good stuff. And
Yes.
Wait, can you tell us what's coming next in like the next book for Queen's Counsel?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So Livia Blackburn has written the Mulan continuation that's coming next fall, probably around the same time as now. And then we have a Jasmine book coming in 2022 from Alexandra Monier. So we have a lot ahead of us. And like, I'm just so excited to see these covers, but like with their imagery, like it's going to be like this cover is, I'm tooting my own horn here, but like it's stunning.
No, it's so stunning that I messaged Disney because they're like, oh, we should do a repackage for the Bells. And I said, and you're going to repackage it to look similar to Purple Rose because that is a beautiful book. And that's the type of book that I want if we're going a different direction. So just know that.
Wonderful. We need more books like this. I'm so excited for their books too. Like and I'll get to read them early. So
yeah, they're so lucky. I'm gonna harass Disney again and be like, hey, I need to have an event.
Yes. I know we have a group chat called the Queens.
That's like we need to have one called the Mirror. That's hilarious. It's called the Mirror. It's like
we got to do panels.
We do. We should do a cross-pollination panel. The Mirror and the Queens.
Yes.
And let me talk to Seal and Lissa. Get that done.
Let us know if you need a host.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Which I guess brings us to our last question, which I guess this kind of touched on, but what, if anything, can you say about what you're working on next? Both of you.
I'll go first because I can't really say much, not for interesting reasons, but the book that I was working on before I ended up writing this one, I finished it in the spring. So I did it between deadlines, which was really fun because I treated it like a reward at the end of every deadline. Instead of getting bored of writing it, I was just really excited. So I can't say much about it, but hopefully it's a weird year. So publishing is weird. Hopefully things will start happening there soon. It's a fantasy. I only really know how to write fantasy. It's not historical in the sense that like it's secondary world. So but it is based on a historical conspiracy theory that I will DM you about.
Okay,
because it's a huge spoiler. I can't.
Emma, please.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what's happening. And right now I'm working on another fantasy because you always have to be working on the next thing. And that one's more about like Renaissance astrology mixed with like a vengeful god and things like that. Anyway, so
Look, I'm your reader, so like.
But what about you? You've got so much coming.
Oh God. Okay, so I have a huge thing that's going to announce this week. So I'm excited for that. Like Wednesday will be a big day for something that comes
you just saw your trailer, right?
Yes, I saw my trailer for Tiny Pretty Things, which will drop on a day that rhymes with Sunday. So that
subtle.
Right, Netflix is watching. I didn't say it. And then, and then the show is coming before the end of the year. And then I have Shattered Midnight, which comes out next fall, which is the second in the Mirror series. So you get to follow that family and what happened in the fairy tale curse. And then I have my middle grade debut, which I'm very excited about, called The Marvelers, which is
Me too.
I'll make sure you get your Star Post and your box.
Yes, please.
It's my answer to that turf lady. And so I'm
a lot on the horizon that we're all very excited for.
There's so much to look forward to in 2021 right now. So many reasons, but this has been just a delight. Thank you both for coming. It was lovely hearing from you. It was lovely to, fan out over France, I guess. But can you I don't know, something like that.
Francophile.
I need a baguette now.
I was trying to think of Francophile out.
That works too.
It didn't work. So fan out was the next thing that came to mind. But thank you to Emma and Dhonielle for joining us tonight. And thank you to all of our lovely viewers in the comments. And I hope that you are as excited about this book as we are. So please, please, please go read it and keep reading. And thank you for always supporting our authors. And thank you for always supporting Mysterious Galaxy.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wonderful. You're always welcome back.
Everybody get
Thank
the
you
book.
So much, Dhonielle.
Yeah, of course. I can't wait for your next thing. Yay!
Oh, yay! I'll text you.
Okay.
All right. Yes. And on that note, everybody have a lovely night.
Good night.
Thanks for watching.